her day will come.
I'm here today. I'm going to talk to you guys about the history of consoles. The Webster Dictionary defines a console as an electronic system that connects to a display, such as a television, and used primarily to play video games. I don't consider PCs and handhelds in this category. I'm going to go ahead and ask you guys, how many of you guys have owned a console? By the show of hands. Consoles are actually becoming more common in households, just as common as microwaves, because one thing is because here recently oil prices have gone up, so people are less likely to travel because gas prices and airline fees are really expensive, so they choose to buy more entertainment things such as consoles and maybe have Netflix or watch movies at home so they don't have to go anywhere. Consoles, though, it has a really long history. It's important to kind of look at this history because consoles have kind of grown off this and have gained popularity because of looking at their past mistakes and things they did right, and it's very important. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start off with the very first console, which is the Magnavox Odyssey. It came out in 1972, and it was invented by Ralph Baer, which people consider today as the father of video games due to his many contributions to future consoles as well as helping create a few video games. Sadly, though, the New York Times reported his death on December 7th, 2014 at the age of 92. He will be missed in this community. The very first console to kind of start out the first generation was the Odyssey 100, which came out in 1975, and it used the popularity of the Pong game by Atari that came out in 1972, and it kind of caught a lot of people's attention because they used to see that game in the arcade all the time, and it was very popular. Later that same year, about midway through, the Atari came out with their own version of their Pong game as a home console called the Sears. And then the Odyssey 200 came out, which was supposed to be like kind of the more luxurious version of the 100 because it added a third game called Smash. And then that console ended the first generation. The second generation started with the VEST in 1976, which introduced the idea of video game cartridges that you could interchange on the console and play many different games. There was a lot of consoles that came out at this time, but these were the three most notorious ones. And the Atari 2600 actually defines this generation as being the most popular, so when people talk about the second generation, they usually refer to the Atari. Then, the third generation, or this is the crashes of 1977 and 1983, it started in 1977 due to many obsolete consoles and Pong clones being sold to the stock market at a loss, which hurt the video game market. But thankfully to the Bally's Library computer in 1977 and the new Odyssey in 1978, the continued sales over the year helped to keep the market afloat. But unfortunately in 1983, this market crashed even harder this time because of mainly due to Atari's two games that were really hyped, and they ended up making, like, the Pac-Man one, they made like 12 million copies of it, and they only sold 7 million. And then the more famous one of the two was the E.T. that they ended up making 5 million copies of the game, but only sold about 1.5. So they had millions of games that they invested millions of dollars in, and they ended up losing $536 million. And to get rid of these games, they actually buried them in a landfill, which was recently just uncovered, and they were looking at many games that were buried there. Luckily though, in the third generation, Nintendo kind of revived the market with its NES in 1983. It was very popular. It was started out in Japan and got really popular there, and then it came overseas to America. Other consoles came out around this time by Sega and Atari, but unfortunately they could not, even though they did kind of well and they made a good fair amount of money, nothing could contend with the NES. The fourth generation started with the Turbo GTA FX 16 in 1987 by Nintendo, which introduced a better computer chip that increased the graphics in many of the games, and it's kind of started these consoles off, but it wasn't very popular and the Sega Genesis actually overtook it very quickly. Well, Nintendo, to get back on top, came out with the SNES, which is the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, in 1990, and they took the top spot again. But throughout the rest of this generation, Sega and Nintendo kept fighting back and forth for the top spot, which was being known as the first major console wars. The Super Nintendo, they said, ended up actually winning because they sold 9 million more consoles, but there are many debates going on today that the amount of money it spent in commercials and stuff like that actually lowered how much money the company made down to what the Sega made by selling its consoles, so it's still a debated topic today. The Neo Geo AES actually finished out this generation as the last one, and it came out in 1991. The fifth generation started with the 3DO Interactive Multiplayer by Panasonic. In this generation, it was common to see they started implementing CD-ROMs into all the consoles. This generation also, there was a big number of competitors for the first time, and there was 5 major ones, which was Panasonic, Atari, Sony, Sega, and Nintendo. Nintendo was the only one out of these consoles that actually remained to the game cartridges, while everything else just used CDs. PlayStation dominated this generation because it catered to third-party developers, which were just starting out, and they came out with a lot more games on the other consoles, so it was a big hit with basically everybody. The sixth generation of consoles actually started with the Dreamcast in 1998. It's not a very well-known console, and it wasn't very popular. But however, the PlayStation 2 came out in 2000, and it was the first console that kind of introduced internet into consoles and brought to online play. It was a very big hit, and it was actually the most popular out of this entire generation, and at the end it sold over 150 million consoles, and the next closest was the Xbox, which only sold about 21 million. The GameCube's only fault to not being anywhere near these top 2 spots was that it didn't have internet in the console. So it was still popular, but if it had internet, it might have actually even contended with the PlayStation 2. Now, the Xbox actually brought a change because it brought Xbox Live, which was a really great format for multiplayer games online, and it made it very popular, and it actually started what we know today as big MLG players started all of this Xbox Live. The 7th generation started with the PlayStation, or the Xbox 360 in 2005, and each of these consoles kind of brought something special to the table. The 360 brought kind of HD rendered games for the first time and ran it as all did these consoles, but the 360 started with 720p graphics. The Wii brought for the first time motion movement in video games with their motion controllers. And then in 2006, the PlayStation 3 brought it the addition of a Blu-ray player, or Blu-ray drive, which was unheard of in any console before. Now, out of all these 3 consoles, the Wii ended up selling the most consoles with 30 million, but the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 were basically tied for second with only 26 million consoles sold. But as the figures came out in the end, the consoles were too close to decide a winner of this generation. And it was today's even debated, and this was the start of the second console wars, which actually is even going on today with the 8th generation of what we know today, the Wii U, Xbox One, and the PlayStation 4. Now, this generation all promised 1080p graphics, and there's actually a bigger focus on entertainment in the consoles, such as better integration of Facebook, Twitter, and Netflix, and YouTube, and the internet, and all these consoles. The Xbox One actually got hurt when sales at the very beginning because of its kind of policies that nobody really liked, which included like once you owned a game, you couldn't resell it, and it was basically useless. But it was only you could use it, which was not unliked. And the other thing was you had to have constant internet connection, which people really didn't like that because not everybody had internet that bought consoles. The PlayStation 4 took the lead early, followed by the Wii U, and the Xbox kind of lagged behind. But actually, in a August 2012 article of GameWire, it said that the Xbox One actually took the lead with a 63% increase in sales, but it was only slight. As right now, the consoles are all almost in almost a deadlock tie with the Xbox One just slightly ahead. So at this point, we don't know who's going to be the dominant console at the end of this generation. And this generation is also known as next gen, which is a phrase that was coined during the E3, which was the electronic kind of like they introduced like new electronics and video games to the market and trying to get people interested in it as they were getting ready to come out. Now for my closing remarks, consoles at the very beginning had a rough start and they didn't really gain much popularity at the beginning, but they slowly worked their way up and they hit many downs and then they had really high points, and they're now steadily climbing higher and higher, and hopefully they continue to do so in the future. Consoles still look back to the past, so it's important to look back because they can grow and make themselves better for the consumers and learn off their mistakes. Consoles will take you on a wild ride, and all you have to do is hit the start button and game on.